if you leave in the middle of the day, even like this semester, if you leave in the middle of the day, you're going to be hard pressed to find a spot. And with the 2024, you weren't going to find a spot. Like, you had to wait until classes got out.
If you're staying for the
So
extra
classes would get out 10 minutes before your class started. So you had to wait for classes to get out and just circle the parking lots until somebody left.
Oh, how frustrating.
Yeah.
It was so frustrating.
But they made it sound like science, they made it sound like everything. And then if you stay for the mission trip.
No, $300 additional to the conference, and on that,
It's so.
cover everything.
I don't know whether you can tell us.
Well, if they're, maybe they're all throwing us in an abandoned church.
You're
Sleep
like, are
on the
you going
floor.
to mug me or are you going to steal my spot? Let me know first, please.
Bring your earplugs and snores.
Yeah, because you follow something.
I don't
You
know.
see someone
Or
walking.
they have us at Burger King all the time.
Like, I didn't like this.
And then you see like you're pulling up, and then you see somebody pulling this way, and you're like, you
That's
turn
I'm gonna
your-
give you the stink eye.
turn your
picture.
signal on,
Oh,
and you're like, no,
yeah.
that's my spot. You can't. No.
But did you get anything?
That one's mine. Don't touch that.
I don't know how much more they can expand. There's
They
not
really
any
do.
more there.
Okay, you got conference, SRC. Then you
I know
have
there's
second
that whole-
This accounts for everything else we didn't think about before.
I have not gotten any course.
Off of like 19.
I just checked the box when I filled out the application saying I'm saying.
They event, I mean, are they trying to make it so all students?
Yesterday.
I don't think so.
2 days ago.
I think they're just trying to make it to
I haven't
where
got an email.
Hi, how are you?
second year students can.
Yeah, it's like 2 or 3 days ago.
And then ideally
I'll
they
ask you
can.
that question.
Ideally, then they're gonna say you
Better
have
make a list.
a
Is it that time of the semester where everybody's just.
anywhere, bring a
Really?
car. So that's what they do with first year students, obviously. Most schools do that, but usually when they start requiring second year, they do the same thing for second year students. Because then the parking problem isn't a problem.
Yeah, you get a bunch of like half the day.
How much are passes?
$300.
I have an exam tomorrow. What? Okay, I don't remember. One of the people.
That's what I learned, which is exactly the.
That's not terrible.
Yeah, but you can change this by dividing it by
It's
16.
like 260. I think it's 265.
How are you producing?
At least we're not dying.
And then it's what do you say, 120?
Yeah, and you know, I'll be
It
good
almost
enough
looks
at.
like,
It might be one, that's all you need. Right, exactly. Like, certain
This
things,
week.
good, two nice
We're
shirts.
whiteboarding on mosquitoes.
Figure out.
I don't know.
Mosquitoes good.
Mosquitoes good. Alright, so yeah, it's on the topic.
Actually, I'll probably be eating since we
Or you
I
can do
made
this.
3 back.
This question.
You've got.
because we figured like
That's one of the reasons he's just like, why do I need to?
Right.
people better.
Because he's like, then I have to pay for me.
So much paper insurance.
Yes.
Well, now we're doing
He's
it.
like, I don't want to deal with
People are
that.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
I remember you talking about some kind of meal prep situation.
Now it sucks for him too, it's like,
or something.
I don't know if companies will.
Before finally just talk.
Welcome everybody. Hello. Welcome. Hello. Greetings. I'm Coleman. I think you guys all already know me. Thanks for showing up tonight, even though it's rapidly approaching finals, and I know that everybody seems to be busy, so it's a little bare bones tonight. But that's all right. We're glad you're here. Some announcements. We are having a talk next week with Sarah Geis on listening. Why does everybody like talking but nobody likes listening? So hopefully the Lord will show us how to be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath through that talk. Also, we have whiteboarding this Friday on the topic of is there such thing as a good mosquito? Hopefully something we learned tonight will help us with that whiteboarding event that we're having later this week. And then next week, we are having another whiteboarding event. I think it's still up in the air exactly what we're doing because we might have JFA come out, or we might just be whiteboarding with Dr. Wind again. I'm not sure we have CCU. Yeah. So CCU might come out, we'll see. But either way, it's gonna be a good one, so if you guys can, please turn out for that. Tonight, we have our very own Carl Christianssen giving a talk on is there such thing as a good mosquito? I don't know about you guys, but all my experiences with mosquitoes have been bad. So hopefully You're going to hear a pretty good defense because I'm going to need one. But Carl Christianssen has a BA in Wildlife and Ecology, Master's from Iowa State in Entomology, and he got his Christian Science Religion degree, his Master's from Biola University. So here he is.
Good.
That was science and religion, not Christian Science.
Yeah, not Christian Science. No. Yeah, science and religion. That's Christian apologetics. All right. Well, so the overall topic of the evening is about mosquitoes and presents a very interesting test case on a number of different things. Kind of presses us in our understanding about the world that we live in. And so here's the question. So, survey you. How many would you agree with the statement, mosquitoes are good? We get 3.
For one reason.
Okay, and maybe another. Okay. Okay, so the majority is saying no. So the question is, most of you are skeptical on that account. And so why would we be skeptical about that they're good? Yeah.
Malaria.
Okay, well, you're hitting the big hit. Let's just think of some of the basic stuff. Why you think that mosquitoes aren't good? We have our own personal experiences. Before, when we were meeting earlier, we were all telling our horror stories about mosquitoes. No one has had a delightful or good experience with mosquitoes. So it's the buzzing in your ears, you lose sleep at night, you get those itchy welts after you've had a bite that Grayson said lasts for days. Yeah, right? They're annoying. It keeps you from doing stuff outside. You have to stay indoors and not go out. Even NFL football games are actually constrained by mosquito activity. Down in Miami, they actually force them to have their games earlier so that people are not out at mosquito time. So they actually do control what we do. Now, while we can escape mosquitoes by running indoors, not everyone has that opportunity. And so particularly after hurricanes or flooding events, we'll see where livestock are actually killed because of depredation by mosquitoes. The swarming is so great, and the blood loss that comes from the mosquitoes is so great that cattle actually die. It's a thing. But, like you mentioned, we also know that mosquitoes are responsible for a lot of diseases that end up killing people. Now, so you mentioned malaria. Now, realize that all mosquitoes are doing, not that this makes it any better, they're just the vector for the disease. The malaria is a blood parasite that they're just carrying from one person to another, but they are the vector. So they do bear some responsibility for that. So these stats, I haven't gone in and updated them for recent, but in 2019, 400,000 people died from malaria. And there were 219 million cases of it. So that's kind of good news, bad news. If you get malaria, it doesn't mean you will die, but there is a chance that you will. So like me, I'm heading off to Uganda this summer. I will have my malaria pills in hand to make sure or hope I don't get malaria. But there are other diseases. So dengue fever, which is in Southeast Asia, is responsible for 40,000 deaths a year. And then more locally, we have what's called West Nile virus. And we have a certain amount of deaths here in Colorado and in the Rocky Mountain region, 60 deaths per year from it. When West Nile first came on the scene, it was many times higher. But because of mitigation practices, we've kind of reduced the risk for getting West Nile, but it's still here. But the last one I put up there is always very interesting. Anyone know what lymphatic filariasis is?
swelling and itchy bump?
Huh?
Is it the swelling and the itchy bump?
No, it's worse than that.
Is it like the swelling of your lymph nodes?
Yes. And so what do you look like then?
You look like you have a bunch of these big domes all over your body.
No, so a common name for the disease is elephantiasis. Where people get this massive swelling of their legs. Huge. And the thing is, you don't die from it. It's just horrible. Now, good news is it's treatable. But it causes a lot of pain and suffering in people. So we get it. We don't like mosquitoes. So the thing is, this brings up what we would call dysteleological arguments as opposed to teleological. What's a teleological argument say?
Do you remember?
Grayson?
Purpose of something? Like the design?
Okay, so we see purpose and design and things, therefore, what?
The designer.
There's a designer, yeah.
What?
There's a designer behind.
Which means what? What are you pointing to with that kind of argument? We see design,
Has to be a designer.
there has to be a designer, right? So God is behind the universe. But we have a counter argument to that. We have what are called dysteleological arguments. So they kind of run like this, so could mosquitoes actually be an argument to disprove the existence of God? So people will say things like, one, there really is no purpose in creation. We're just here. And they'll say things like this, a loving God would not have made such a thing as a mosquito. And because there is such a thing as a mosquito, then there can't be a God. How intelligent would an intelligent designer be who would make something like a mosquito? Therefore, God doesn't exist. But what do you think about that? Is that a compelling argument? Eric?
The way I see it, mosquitoes are basically part of the curse of sin.
Well, I mean, that could be a perspective, but do you have evidence for that?
Isn't it somewhere in Genesis?
In Genesis, it says, and because man sinned, he made mosquitoes. Is that, is that where we go? I don't think we get that. We're going to have to infer a lot.
I think we do need to infer things.
We infer things a lot. So here's what I want to do first. I want to dispel the whole dysteleological argument right from the get-go. Okay? Because it's a bad argument. The first thing is it presumes omniscience. Because it says, God would never do X. Now the thing is, when you start putting mosquitoes in there, what's it sound like you got there? It sounds like you got this scientific argument. In I think in every case, all the dysteleological arguments are not scientific arguments. They're pretenders. They really are philosophical arguments. Because what they're trying to do is say that I know what God would do if there was a God. And so it's not a scientific argument. It's a philosophical argument. And it actually is making a moral claim without any grounding. Because what are you saying? Mosquitoes are evil. God wouldn't create evil things, therefore there's no God. Well, what problem did you just end up with?
Problem of evil.
Well, what about it?
Well, you say that there's no God, and God would be the one who created an absolute moral system. And so if there's no God, then you can't say that something is good or evil.
Right, ever catch that? Anyone not catch that? Yeah. So you go and disprove God because of evil, then you don't get to say anything is evil. And the whole thing kind of disappears. That being said, if we then say mosquitoes are a part of God's creation, then we've got some splaining to do. We're not off the hook. Even though the theological argument's a bad argument, that doesn't get us off the hook. We still have to say something about mosquitoes, right? So, why might we think mosquitoes could be good? You whipped out your Bible, and what's our Bible tell us? God goes through and he creates everything, all the beasts, says all the things that creep upon the earth. And what does God say about all those things? He says, it's good. God says it's good. Now, some people will say, like Eric just did there, they go, wait. Genesis 1, that's before the fall, right? So it was all because of the fall. And then we get mosquitoes, right? But Paul's writing to Timothy, and he says this. This is after the fall. He's writing this, remember? And after the fall, what does Paul say? He says, for everything created by God is good. Now, understand the context there. He's really talking about marriage in this case. But it's a general principle. He's invoking a creation principle to use here. So he recognizes that the sinfulness of man can corrupt the good things of God, but it doesn't stop them from being good. So on Paul's account, mosquitoes are still good. So we corrupt things with our sin, but good things remain good. So here's then the question, okay? Would we have any justification for saying that God made mosquitoes, right? Now, some people would say, okay, well maybe, at the get-go, God kind of created a world, but maybe there weren't mosquitoes in it, but then we have like some secondary causes. So something like evolution comes along, and after the fall maybe, mosquitoes evolve, and that's why we have mosquitoes. If that's the case, does God get a pass then? No, he's not responsible for mosquitoes because they evolved. So we don't have to worry about that. Does that work?
He's not omniscient anymore. They're omnipotent at that point.
Ah, okay. Well, who was responsible for the evolution that brought about the mosquitoes? So if we want to say that God is a sovereign God, he is omnipotent, he is omniscient, he has all the omnis, right? Even if he did instantiate evolution and therefore mosquitoes, guess who's still to blame? He doesn't get a pass. He doesn't get a pass. But what I wonder is, do we have some evidence that God actually intentionally made mosquitoes? They just didn't come about by accidental processes, evolutionary processes, but they actually came about by intention. So here's the thing. So this is, we're really thinking about teleology. Do we see design behind here, and then would God be behind that? So we're working on what we call competing hypotheses. So what kind of reasoning is this? Deductive, inductive, or abductive?
Abductive.
Abductive. It's abductive. So this is competing hypothesis, inference to the best explanation. So we've got mosquitoes, that's our observation. And which explanation best, explains why mosquitoes are here? So is it by evolutionary processes, which we just said, God still maybe doesn't get a pass if it came by evolution. But does it look like there could be intelligent agency here? In which case God intentionally made mosquitoes. Now that kind of changes the conversation, doesn't it? So I'm going to take a look at two features of mosquitoes. I'm just going to present what we see here because most people don't know. We're gonna take a look at the mouth parts that mosquitoes have. And we're also gonna look at a pumping system that mosquitoes utilize. We're gonna look at two biological characteristics of mosquitoes. So, since none of you are entomologists, let me just quick entomology lesson here. So all insects have paired mouth parts. So this is a grasshopper's head with its mouth parts. And so the mandibles are these chewing structures that they'll break down grain and that kind of thing. They have these maxillary palps. These are helping, they don't have hands. So they have to have something that kind of helps feed stuff into their mouth so they can chew it with their mandible. And then the labrum here really is just trying to hold the food in so it doesn't fall out. And then we have this labial palp that also is the lower part trying to keep the food in, but also has some palps there to kind of help move stuff in. So you got a lot of moving parts when insects are eating. And depending on the kind of food that insects are eating, they'll have different mouth parts for it. So this is a grasshopper. Here's the mouth parts for a mosquito. Now, when you have a mosquito land on you, all you see is this guy, okay? But that's not all that is there. What you're seeing in this diagram is kind of an exploded version for you engineers of what's actually there. So let me kind of walk you through what are all these different lines here? What all is inside there? So this structure here really is a casing for 6 different stylets that fit inside it. And this stuff all together is 1/4 of the size of a human hair. So it's really, really thin. It's thin enough to fit inside a capillary. What's the width of a capillary? Well, red blood cells go through capillaries single file. So capillaries are very, very narrow, and these have the ability to fit inside capillaries. When a mosquito takes your blood, it's not just poking anywhere. It's poking into a capillary to start drawing blood out. So it's really, really small. So let's talk about the labium first of all. So that's this part here. This is like this big sheath that encloses all of these stylets. So when a mosquito takes a bite, the whole thing is not going into your skin. So you see in this diagram, so this sheath is actually getting folded back, and then those stylets are what are actually going into your skin and getting into a capillary. Okay? So it gets folded out of the way. It's not actually going into your skin. Then we have these two. These are the maxillae. So these are paired. You got 2 of them. Here's what the tip of one looks like. Does that look pretty ominous? Serrated blades. What does that look like it's designed for? That's ready to cut in through your skin, right? When they're going to take your blood, they've got to penetrate the skin. So it has these serrated edges. You can see on this, so this little bar here, what is this?
Wow.
1 micrometer. This is really, really small. Micrometer is what? What of a meter?
1
Times 10 to the -6.
Yeah, it's a millionth. It is a millionth of a meter. So a millimeter is what? 1,000th of a meter. So this is 1,000th of a 1,000th. It's even hard to imagine. So you look on a meter ruler, right? And you put 1,000 marks in between the millimeter. That's that. Okay? So just to give you an idea of scale. It's hard to imagine how small these things are. Then we have this next structure called the labrum. So it's a U-shaped stylet. So here's what the tip of it looks like. So it's U-shaped. So you can see it has an open side here. And notice what we have down at the end here. Nice little sharp point. So it's going to also help penetrate between skin cells. So it also is involved in cutting tissue along with maxillae. But then what's really interesting, and you don't see it really well on here, you can see it a little bit, there are sensory hairs on the tip of the labrum that have chemoreceptors. And they have the ability to smell a protein in your blood for ethylphenol. So they're not just randomly poking into your body to get a blood meal. They know exactly where the blood is when they're poking into your skin to be able to find that capillary. Keep in mind, they've got to do this quick, right? If the mosquito keeps poking and poking and poking and poking until it finally finds a capillary, what's going to happen to the mosquito? Right? But they are stealth agents. They can come in and they just kind of sniff around a little bit and they know exactly where to go in to hit that capillary because they have these chemosensory hairs. Now, what's interesting, we've taken note of this, and bioengineers, biomedical engineers have taken the cue from mosquitoes, and they are using the same design to produce microneedles for biopsies. So you can go into the skin, because what do mosquitoes do well? They can go in the skin without any disruption. You hardly even know it. Usually, right? When a mosquito takes blood from you, you don't even know it. Most of the time, unless they kind of like move your hairs on your skin and then you feel them, you usually don't know it. Wouldn't it be great if we could do biopsies and you don't know it? And just to take a small sample, that's all we need. So then another part are the mandibles. So what are the mandibles for a mosquito? Remember in the grasshopper they were these big, robust, like chewing pieces. Well, they're not so much in the mosquito mouth parts. These are very thin, flattened stylets. They're good for kind of like moving tissue out of the way. So while the maxillae are doing some cutting, they're kind of spreading things away. And then they also close up that U-shaped labrum. So here's the two mandibles and here's the labrum. And all together, they close this thing off. So it's a closed off feeding tube. So we have a food canal. Then we have this interesting mouth part. It's called the hypopharynx. This is not a typical mouth part in other insects. We do see it like in honeybees that also have a fluid meal that they're pulling up with nectar, but it's not common to all insects. And this one is really important because it's a delivery system. So while you have the food tube that's pulling blood up, the hypopharynx has a channel for delivering the mosquito's saliva into the wound. Now, this is real important because the saliva from mosquitoes includes a protein that is an anticoagulant. So, because the whole blood clotting system that we have is initiated when you have disruption in the skin tissue or in the epithelial cells of the capillaries. And instantly we start doing the blood clotting mechanism. So they're injecting an anticoagulant so that the blood can keep flowing as long as they're taking a blood meal. It also, some of the proteins also have a vasodilator. What's that? Yeah, it enlarges the blood vessels. So you got two things going for it, right? It enlarges the diameter of the capillary to help the blood flow and has an anticoagulant. So they're setting themselves up to get a really, really fast delivery of blood so they can get cut out of there in a hurry. Okay, so that's all the different mouth parts. So any question on those? And this is like a cross-sectional view. So here's that hypopharynx that's sitting here with the tube that's delivering the saliva. Saliva, by the way, that's how you get infected. So when they're pumping those anticoagulants in, if they're carrying a virus or a filarial parasite or a trypanosome or something like that, that's how it's going to get into you. So just FYI. All right, so got the picture on mouth parts.
The anticoagulant that your body is responding to can cause the itch.
Correct. Well, and also the vasodilator. So any foreign protein that comes into your system, you have an allergic reaction, and that's what causes the welt and the itching and the redness, because your body's trying to fight off a foreign protein. Yeah.
I thought I remembered hearing somewhere that they also lay eggs in your skin.
No.
No? That's
No.
nonsense? Okay.
No, fleas might be laying eggs while they're taking blood meals, but not mosquitoes.
Okay.
Not mosquitoes. All right, now here's the thing. So you have a food tube and you're sticking it into a capillary, right? Does that mean the blood is going to instantly flow up the mouth part? This is first law, right? What's first law say? Object in motion tends to stay in motion unless,
Acted upon by an external force.
okay, right? So we have to have some other force that's going to cause the direction to change. So if I take a drink straw and I stick it into a river, does that mean the water is going to start instantly coming up through the straw? No. Okay, so even though the blood's moving, it doesn't mean that blood's going to go into the mosquito. So what does a mosquito need? A mosquito needs a pump. So what you're seeing here is an actual photograph of the pump system inside the head of a mosquito. Okay, so here's the head of a mosquito right here. Okay, this is X-ray photography. So here you can see this is the mosquito's eye. Here's its antennae. Here its mouth parts are coming off of here, and this darkened region here is this pump mechanism here. And so there's actually two pumps that are involved. There's this first one here, this is called the sebareal pump. And then here's a pharyngeal pump. And of course, the thing that makes pumps really work and get flow going in the right direction is right here, there's a valve that keeps the blood flowing in this direction, okay? So in this diagram, so in this drawing, I tried to highlight for you so you could see. So this is the mosquito's head. There's his mouth parts. What I colored in purple here, this is the two pumps, the sebareal pump and the pharyngeal pump, and then here's his esophagus. Okay, so this is the whole digestive tract here. But to get this thing to work, you have to have musculature. So here are muscles attached. So this is the wall of the mosquito's head. So there's muscles attached from there to that pump. And those muscles are going to contract and cause that sebareal pump to widen. So you created a vacuum, so fluid flows in, right? Okay. Then alternately, we have muscles attached, and you can't see, there's the wall of the mosquito's head here. These muscles attaching there, here, and then on the other side. So these muscles are also expanding and they're alternating, right? So this one pulls up blood from here, and then there's a valve here that closes off, right? And then this one fills in. So these two pumps are alternating. That's pretty amazing. So you've got this pump. Now, do all insects have pumps in their head?
How fast is the pump cycle?
We'll get to that in just a second. We'll show you that. Okay. So here's the interesting thing then. Okay. It's not just that they have a pump system, they actually have the ability to modulate the pump system. Because sometimes mosquitoes, they just need a drink of water. Okay. And so that's what you're seeing in the blue here. Here's the blue is the sebareal pump, the red is the pharyngeal pump. And if you're just drinking water, you're just going along like this. But when you're drinking blood, you want to get out of there and fast. And so what we see are spikes that are occurring here. So big bursts of power to pull in blood even faster just when they're taking blood. So to your question, so you see the undulation here, you can kind of figure out, okay, here's 5 seconds And so we see what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pumps per second. That's pretty good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these pumps are working pretty quick, yeah.
I just wanted to say that something that I learned in fluids class is that we can't do this yet, like with industrial pumps. You pretty much have to set the pump to the speed that you want, and that is what it is set to. You cannot modify it.
Right.
But the mosquito can.
But the mosquito can.
And
So
your
look,
heart.
every 15 seconds is creating a large burst to increase the pressure, to increase the rate of flow. That's pretty amazing. Now, what's also interesting then is what are all the structures supporting this inside? This was one of my just like wow moments in my life. So my master's research was with mosquitoes. I spent many evenings measuring the length of mosquito wings under a microscope, thousands upon thousands of them for my research. It gets pretty boring. So one night I decided, hey, let's just do something fun and interesting. So I took a couple heads of a mosquito and I put them in a little KOH, potassium hydroxide. Potassium hydroxide is great because what kind of material is it, chemists?
It's a base.
It's a base. It's a really strong base and it's good at clearing biological material. But it'll leave the exoskeleton behind.
Wow.
Okay, so I let it sit in the KOH for a while, and so it dissolves all the muscle and everything. And then you just have the exoskeleton, the chitinous exoskeleton, which is non-living material. And you pull it out and look at it in the microscope. And what do I see in there? Inside the head of a mosquito, that's how big? It's this big. And inside the head of the mosquito are these braces that are inside. Okay, because you've got the sphere, and keep in mind what's happening. You have all these muscles that are attached to the two pumps that are pulling on the sides of the head. Plus, you have all the muscles that are attached to the mouth parts that are pulling on the head. So that spherical structure of the mosquito is getting pushed and pulled in all different directions. What keeps it from collapsing? It has internal bracing inside it, even in something that's that small. Okay? All right, so any questions on that pumping mechanism? We've got pump, we've got muscles, we've got internal bracing. Okay? Yeah.
What else do they eat? It's only the pregnant female, right?
So the females are taking blood, a blood meal, primarily to get the protein to be able to produce eggs. Females will take 2 blood meals to get enough protein to produce a clutch of eggs. But the males don't do that. So the males are just drinking plant juices. So they're going to use that same proboscis to stick it into the xylem elements, or not the xylem, sorry, the phloem elements of a plant and pull out the sap. It has all the good stuff in it, all the nutrients and stuff are in the phloem. So they'll do the same thing, but you don't have to worry about getting swatted by a sunflower, right? You just stick it in there and go and take your own sweet time. And the females will do the same, okay, because they don't always take a blood meal. But when they take a blood meal, right, you have to have all these things just right. Okay, so here's the thing. You got the picture. We've got mouth parts. We've got a pumping mechanism. So the question is, if we presume that this happens from evolutionary processes, we got to remember what are the requirements to pull off anything on a naturalistic level. Okay, what are the demands here? So the first thing is we realize that these are incremental changes that have to occur. Small mutations in the DNA makes a small change in a particular structure, and every step along the way has to confer an advantage. So if you go away from the crushing mouth parts of a grasshopper to something different, that change has to confer an advantage. You're giving up eating grass and grain, and you're going to something else, and whatever else has to already kind of be there. You have to already have an advantage. The other thing is that, remember, these changes in the DNA are random. They're accidental changes, mutations to the DNA. What do we know about random changes to the DNA? Most of the time, they're bad news. They don't work. Okay? They're deleterious. They actually are harmful most of the time. So you're really lucky if you get anything that's good. So just realize that. Then, for what we're talking about here, to get everything that we've got in the mosquitoes, we need to understand that every single one of those mouth parts is controlled by an individual gene. It's not like we modify one single gene and suddenly we go from having a grasshopper mouth part to a mosquito mouth part. So to get all of those different mouth parts, the labium, the labrum, the maxillae, the mandibles, the hypopharynx, to get all those parts to conform together to get you the mosquito mouth part, you'd have to change multiple genes to correspond to that. Plus, we have to have musculature that is connected to the feeding tube and to the, inside the head to create that pumping mechanism. We have to have the tentorial structures to withstand the pressures that the mosquito's head is undergoing. You also have to have protein production that's going on. So we have, not every insect is producing anticoagulants. Why would a grasshopper produce anticoagulants? So they're producing a particular protein to make this whole thing happen. We also have chemosensors. So you've got a membrane-bound protein in these chemosensory hairs that has the ability to connect with blood proteins, to detect blood proteins. So all of these things all have to be coordinated. All these mutations all have to be happening at the same time. So do we understand the demands for an evolutionary mechanism? This is not just, it can't just be a one-off thing, one at a time. Well, let's make the maxillae really long with sharp ends on it. All the while the mandibles are still doing this. That's not going to confer any advantage on you. So realize that in terms of evolutionary processes have no insight. They don't know what you're going to get if you make this change or that change. They have no way to anticipate that. So there's no forethought, and certainly no intentionality. If it's random, we're just changing something and we hope it works. But we're having to change a whole bunch of things all at the same time. So the question is, so that's the demands of evolution. Could that happen? Seems a little unlikely, but maybe it could. Maybe it could. Maybe we just got really, really lucky, right? So that's one side of the scale. The other side is, okay, maybe there's some intelligent agency here. So is there some reason to think that an intelligent agent was working here? So realize when we're talking about design arguments, these are not God-of-the-gap arguments. We just have no idea how a mosquito would get this, therefore God. We have some ideas of measures that we can look at that give us a clue that intelligent agency was working. So one of them is this thing we call irreducible complexity. So if we have some machine, let's say, and if we were to remove any part from that machine, it would cease to work. Now that doesn't mean the part we're taking away doesn't have any function somewhere else. The whole idea is if we're going to build a machine with multiple parts to it, and we're going to do it in an evolutionary way, we have to be constantly adding pieces to it in a stepwise manner. And every time we add something to it, it has to be an advantage. But if you take away one part and it doesn't do anything, it doesn't help you, guess what? You couldn't get there. You couldn't get that machine by evolutionary processes. Does that make sense? Is that clear? Okay. So in what I just told you, did you notice any example of irreducible complexity? What would you say? Grayson?
I'd say, just the pump for the mosquito. Like, why would you get a pump and not have like basically a hose to pump with?
okay? But you had to have more than the hose, right? You had to have the musculature there as well, right? So that could be an example. What else? Yeah.
The proboscis assembly.
Yeah, the whole assembly of the proboscis, right? So we have the whole sheath that protects the stylus, because remember how small they are. The whole thing together is a quarter of a human hair. That's gonna easily be damaged. So that won't work unless you have something protecting it. But then all those stylets, all those 6 different stylets, all have to be put together in an assembly, right? There's definitely an assemblage to it. Another thing we look at, this is a little similar to irreducible complexity, but I like to make a distinction between that and what we call interdependent systems. So irreducible complexity, I like to focus on like a single system or a single machine that we see that has parts to it. Whereas this, we're thinking about, do we have situations where in order for this to work, we have to have contributions from multiple systems, all converging at the same time in order to make that work. In other words, A is not going to work unless we have B, and B is not going to work unless we have A. So did we notice in what we just looked at here, do we have any evidence for interdependent systems? You see anything like that?
The anticoagulant, otherwise it's gonna clot and
Right, right.
dead mosquito.
Right, so yeah, so if you're not producing the anticoagulant, you're never gonna get blood. Right, so we have that kind of interdependent, and so the coagulant's being produced by one system, whereas the exoskeleton is producing something else. We've got 2 different systems that are working there. Well, there's a whole bunch when we look at that. So like the feeding tube that you just constructed, assembled, is gonna confer no advantage unless you have an anticoagulant and you also have those blood sensors that are gonna allow you to get in, get a blood meal, and get out of there quick, right? But you wouldn't have these unless you had this. It goes both ways. The feeding tube also is worthless without a pumping system. But you wouldn't have the pumping system unless you had that feeding tube. And then you wouldn't have that pumping system unless you had the musculature to make that pumping system go. It's not just the tube, right? But that musculature wouldn't be there unless you were trying to pump something. Then those muscles wouldn't be doing you any good unless you had the structural support inside the head. But you wouldn't have the structural support in the head like it is in the mosquito unless you had this. And then that whole blood detection activity, you wouldn't be useful to you unless you were doing this. Maybe this is the one that maybe falls off a little bit, but we got a lot. The other thing we look at is what we call innovations. We see novel structures, things that are appearing that aren't coming from somewhere else. In evolution, we think modifications are happening because we have an existing structure and we change the genes and it modifies them. Here we're thinking about things that are new things that are coming about. So do we see anything new that are not typical of other insects here? Well, we've got several. So we have that hypopharynx, is that it's an atypical mouth part. Some other insects do have it, but not all. Then the whole blood detecting mechanism. This is new. This is a new development. This is coming out of nowhere. And then the whole anticoagulant production, where you're manufacturing this very specific protein that's going to fight against the clotting cascade that we find in mammals. And then the last one that has been suggested is that when we, and you guys are good at this, you know engineers, the best engineers do what? Copy nature, right? Because nature's kind of figured out a lot of stuff already, so why not steal the idea? There's nothing wrong with that. So we call that bioinspiration. But some people would suggest there's an inference here. Not the only inference, but it's one inference. if we're going to steal a design from nature to make a human design, what are we inferring there? That
Something was designed.
something was designed already, and a design infers a designer. And so what kind of things do we see here? So I mentioned some already. So that labrum is already being used. They've already been producing these microbiopsy needles that are patterned after a mosquito. And then the anticoagulant, they're copying that because they're thinking, especially in biomedical engineering, any kind of tools that are used that will contact blood, we don't want to have blood clotting happening when we're doing these procedures. And so they're doing that already. They're also copying the olfactory sensors in mosquitoes as biosensors, microscopic biosensors. And then one of the things that this is not quite to the blood-sucking mechanism, but it's another thing that people are stealing from mosquitoes, is the nanostructure of the eyes is anti-wetting. So if a raindrop hits a mosquito in the head, what happens to the water? Well, if it hits your skin, it beads up, right? Well, what happens if you have a bead of water stick to the head of a mosquito? That's a problem. But instead, it's super anti-wetting structure, and it just instantly sheds the water away. So material scientists are really, really interested in this nanostructure to create really super hydrophobic surfaces. So all of these, and there's an article here from the government just kind of detailing all the different ways engineers are stealing from mosquitoes. Okay, so here's the thing then. What do you think? Which is more reasonable? All this blood sucking and pumping coming from a mosquito? Is it better explained by evolutionary processes or by an intelligent agent? How many vote for evolution? How many voting intelligent agent? Okay, now we've just created a problem for ourselves. Okay, because what are we saying then?
We don't have any more funding from the government.
What are we saying?
That God created a blood-sucking parasite.
Yeah, God created the blood-sucking parasite. It's God. God is fully responsible. This was not an accident. Looks like an intelligent agent was behind mosquitoes. So then the question is, why did you do that? So one of the things we need to think about, you got to think larger. And this is where I think it's really helpful to look at all of the creation passages in Scripture to get a full understanding of the creation mandate. But in Psalm 148, what's the psalmist say? He says, let them praise the name of the Lord. Now, who do you think them is? If you scan down through the verse here, what is it?
The bugs.
So it says, from the earth, beasts, all livestock, creeping things, the insects, the bugs are supposed to be praising God. So at least on one level, everything that God has created has an intention to it, and that intention is for it to be giving praise to God. Now, that's probably a big shift in thinking, that the job of a mosquito is to praise his creator. Now, of course, that everyone wonders about that a little bit. If God has made everything so that its purpose is to praise him, does that mean God is vain? Why not? You're shaking your head. No, why not?
Because he's worthy of that praise.
Elaborate.
He did create everything.
And he is an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good God.
Okay, so here's the thing, all right? if I went and saw like the best movie ever that I have ever seen, what should I do?
Tell people.
I should tell you. I should tell you about it. That this is a really great movie, right? And what it would say about me if I withheld that information.
Being somewhat selfish.
No, I'm kind of selfish. You know, I'm keeping this to myself. Okay? So we think it is appropriate to tell people about good things. Anyone have a problem with that? Okay, so what if you actually find something that is truly the best thing in the universe? What should you be doing? Telling people about it. And what would we say about you if you didn't do that?
Why not? What's wrong with you?
You're bad, right? Why are you withholding this information about the best thing? So guess what? God is the best thing in the universe. So it is not vain for God to expect everything that he makes to praise him and tell everyone how good God is, because he is the best thing in the universe. It's not vanity. Okay? It's just truth. Yeah.
I think it's a little bit lower level, I mean, closer necessary level, is that we recognize the cause of all this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's praising by recognizing I'm here because I can breathe. Where did that mechanism come from?
Right.
God. So that's recognizing the author of it all.
Right. What's
And
no,
which
Psalm
is-
139? I am what? Fearfully and wonderfully made. You know, it's always turning it back to the one who made us. Now, so here's the question then. We need to think about what we mean by good when God is using it in this case. And so I always think about this passage in Romans. So Paul's writing this letter to the Romans, says, we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Now, when Paul is writing this, what is the context in which he's writing it? Why would he be telling these people that all things work together? Yeah.
There's some intense persecution going on.
Yes. Yes. He's wanting to assure them, guys, don't worry. The bad things that are happening to you is no fault of your own. God is in control, and he's going to work all these things together for good. Right? So, does that mean the Romans are having a delightful time? That they're very comfortable and life is very convenient for them? No. Okay? What is he conveying to them? So this good that he's talking about, all things are going to work together for good. The good is not always that you're going to be happy and comfortable and so forth. The good he's talking about is what? It's tied to his purposes. So God is going to use it. So don't worry, don't fret. Even though you may endure persecution, God is ultimately going to use it for his glory, and we should be really pleased about that. Okay? And so when we think about whose purpose is it, then I always turn to Colossians. Because what does it say about God and his creation? He said, one, God's created everything. In verse 17, he's not only the creator, he's also the sustainer. He didn't just start everything, he's holding everything together. And who did he do that for? Not for me. Now, I get to enjoy it, certainly. But I wasn't the sole object of his creation. It was for what? Paul says what? Everything was created through him and for him. It's for his purposes. And what is, anyone remember what the ultimate purpose that Paul points to? That he has in mind for all that he's doing?
Praising God?
His glory.
Well, ultimately his glory, but he says that it's to reconcile all things to himself. Now, what do you think Paul means by all things?
All things.
All things, okay. We don't sometimes we think of God's redemptive work as exclusive to human beings. But if you read in Romans 8, it's not just humans that he's going to redeem and reconcile. And it's all of creation. He has this idea. Now, do I understand how that's all going to come about? Absolutely not. Let's be clear. I have no idea all the workings of God. But what I can rest on is that God's ultimate purpose, through all the things that he has made, he is working to reconcile all things to himself. Us and all of creation, inclusive. So now we might think, okay, so what about mosquitoes? What purpose might they have? Now here's where we need to be real cautionary. Okay, I always take this, God did the big smackdown on Job and his friends. When he said this, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have this understanding, right? So we've got to be really careful when we start trying to figure out what God's purposes were for doing things, because Job and his friends got it all wrong. They did it badly. And they actually did some emotional harm to poor Job in the process. Okay, so we got to be careful here. But I think we can have some hint and glimmer of the kinds of purposes God may have behind mosquitoes. So one, I would say, the obvious one is ecological. They fit in ecosystems. So I'm teaching a course in biodiversity right now, and now for the last few lectures, we're just going to get off a little bit of ecology. Because I told them the ultimate expression of biodiversity is in ecosystems. Nothing lives alone. Everything has some role to play in the ecosystem, whether you like it or not. So mosquito larvae, what you're seeing in this drawing, they're food for a lot of animals that live in the water. These are aquatic. But as aquatic dwellers, they are really important in the process of recycling nutrients. They're detritivores. So all the dead leaf matter that falls into the water, these guys are chewing it up and making it into smaller bits that then bacteria can get to, and it all gets recycled. They're part of that process. Then the pupae, mosquito are interesting. Most insect pupae are inactive. They lie dormant. They're hidden away. Mosquito pupae actually swim. And these little tubes here are their like snorkels. So they'll sit at the surface of the water, then they'll intake oxygen. And if you bother the water, they'll swim away. So they are living and active. It's unusual. But they also are food for aquatic animals. And then the adults, they also are food. There's all kinds of birds and bats that eat tons of mosquitoes. So they're useful that way. The male mosquitoes in particular are pollinators. Because they're not about sucking blood, they're about sucking plant juices. And they also go into flowers, certain flowers, not every flower, certain flowers, they go in, take some nectar from the flower, and then in the process, they pollinate it. Now the part we don't like is being a disease vector. We don't like the idea of disease, but is there any importance to disease in ecosystems?
Without disease, there's too many deer everywhere.
Right. So this is one of the regulatory mechanisms that kind of helps balance populations. So you have a huge population and most of the deer die off because of starvation, or when you reach a certain density in the population, disease starts spreading and it lowers it. And a few deer die rather than a whole bunch of deer die. So it's a regulatory mechanism, even though we don't like it, but it is useful in ecological terms. I think we also can see some historical purposes. So when you look at the Old Testament, does God use insects at all to change history?
Locusts.
Okay, we have locusts, right? What else do we have?
Doesn't he say he's going to send hornets to the Canaanites to drive them out ahead of like the Israelites?
Yep. Yep. And don't forget Moses.
I was gonna say frogs
I don't remember how many creatures were in the
Yeah.
10 plagues, but
Yeah, but there were gnats and flies.
Yeah.
Now we don't know if one of those was mosquitoes or not because Hebrew is not refined enough to let us know. Could have been. But then, like in Jeremiah, and we see a lot of passages like this, it says, "I will consume them by the sword, by famine, and by pestilence." That's diseases. So God is using diseases. Now, I thought it was really cool and interesting. So this guy, Timothy Weingart, he's a professor over at Mesa College over in Grand Junction. He's a history professor. He wrote this book, came out in 2019. And what he's looking at in this book is how have mosquitoes been influential in history? It was a New York Times bestseller. And just to give you a quick sampling of what he does in his book, he looks at all these different pivotal times in history where the Persians were going up against the Greeks. And what made the difference? Mosquitoes. That the Persians were plagued by mosquitoes as they tried to overrun the Greeks, and it foiled them. Same thing here with the Romans and the Carthaginians. They had the same problem. The Carthaginians were trying to overtake the Romans, and they failed because the mosquitoes, they were infiltrated by mosquitoes when they came through the marshy lands, right? So he gives whole bunches of really good instances where history was shaped and turned because of mosquitoes. I find that really, really interesting. Now, there's no really good detector whether God was actually working in this or not, but there's a possibility, right? Think about what kind of world we would live in if the Persians took sway over the Greeks, or the Carthaginians took sway over the Romans. How different would our world have been today? We can't say. But insects seem to have a pivotal role, and disease spreading in particular, have a pivotal role in shaping history. So there could be historical purposes. Again, we're speculating. I'm not saying this is, everyone gets in trouble because they say, God did this because he's cursing these people, and you have AIDS because, God did this. I don't want to say that, but it's a possibility that God could be using mosquitoes to move history in the direction he wants to. I think there may be some,
Is it fair to say that God allows things to happen and makes things happen because in the end it will be what brings him the most glory?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, I think that's very fair to say.
Okay.
This is where we draw the distinction between miracles and providence. Where miracles are real distinct, noticeable events that are happening in history that we know never would have happened by natural process at all. Miracle. But I think we look at other cases where God seems to be doing something and he's using natural forces and natural means to move and shape history and control what's going on. So we've got both. And so I'd say mosquito would be in the providential category. Perhaps. Then we think about ethical purposes. So we always struggle with this, but God wants to develop character in us, yes? One of those things is compassion. How do you respond when people are hurting and suffering? And would you be able to develop compassion if there were no hurting and suffering? As much as we dislike it. I'd be hard pressed. I try and think about what kind of person would I be if there was no hurting in the world and everything was happy-go-lucky for everybody in the world. What would I be like? I'd be pretty selfish, I think. And I would be all about me. Right? So when we think about all the bad things that mosquitoes do, this creates a context for compassion, does it not? We're forced to really think about how do we care for people who are sick and suffering, who have yellow fever, who have malaria. And then more so, we think about, hey, can we stop this thing? Can we develop a vaccine for yellow fever? Yes, we could. And we alleviated the suffering and the disease. We used to have yellow fever in North America. We no longer have yellow fever because we did something about it. Because we figured out ways to get rid of vectors. We drained the swamps. That is a thing. You always hear Trump saying about drain the swamp. That actually was a thing. They did in Washington, D.C. to get rid of insect populations and keep people from getting insect-borne diseases. It's a thing. It also makes us think about environmental stewardship. Now, some people think, okay, the best way to treat malaria is to wipe out all the mosquitoes. So you want to do that? Remember, they hold a niche in the ecosystem. If you get rid of a mosquito, it fills the niche. Something better or something worse? And do you have any way to tell? No. So this is why I think we're called to be stewards of the environment and not try to be controllers of the environment. So we have to think about those kind of balances. That helps us to think about that. And then I think there are theological reasons. So one, we think that God reveals his presence to us through his creation, through the things that were made. We see evidence of his intelligent agency as evidence that he exists, that he is here, and his fingerprints are all over everything. Now here's the thing, and this is why I kind of like the mosquitoes, because that should be true whether you like it or not. We don't want to be accused of cherry picking the data. So intelligent design, as long as you're pointing to something that's like cool and nice and beautiful and yada yada. But what about something like mosquitoes that actually is not pleasant, that is harmful? And can we see design even there? Then I think we cut through that kind of criticism and say, no, there really is a design feature here. God really is working behind here. And of course, then the question is, are you ready to meet the God who is really there? Is the God in our universe a God who is all about creating utopia for us? Or is there something else going on? I think something else is going on. And I think mosquitoes are evidence for that. I think it also is giving us some indication that God is engaged in history. Not just human history, but biological history. Have mosquitoes always been here? Since the beginning? No, they haven't. There is a certain time in biological history where mosquitoes show up. So what's that tell me? At a certain time in history, God entered into biology and came up with mosquitoes. So he's constantly engaged. That's the very character of God, right? That he wants to intervene with his creation, and that includes, that gives us a case for God intervening with Christ in human history, because this is the thing God does. He intervenes in his creation. All right, so mosquitoes are good because they're somehow, maybe not fully clear, but they're somehow accomplishing his purposes. This is what makes them good. It's not about what I like, what's convenient, what's comfortable for me, but it's because it's accomplishing his purposes in one or more of these areas. That being said, okay, if we say mosquitoes are good, is it okay to swat a mosquito? The audience says? Yes. there is no problem. Remember, what are we doing when we swat a mosquito? We're getting rid of the mosquitoes that might hurt somebody else. Okay, so it's okay. You have my permission. As cool and interesting as mosquitoes are, it's okay to swat mosquitoes. All right. Any other questions for me?
What's the dating of the mosquitoes' arrival?
I was gonna look that up this afternoon. I was trying to look up what's the earliest fossil. Most of our winged insects are all kind of showing up at about 300 million years. But it's interesting because it's like all kinds of winged insects that are all showing up. And so we don't see any evidence of like mosquito evolution. You know, we don't have this species, this species, this species, and then we get mosquito. We don't have that. All we have is unwinged insects at about 400 million years, and then about 300 million years, winged insects of all kinds. And there's nothing in between that says any kind of transition or progression from unwinged things. So we've got that too.
This kind of makes me think of yellow jackets, because I hate yellow jackets, but then I had read that they're really good pollinators.
Yep.
And the venom is actually proven into fighting cancer.
Yes, yeah, a lot of
So
venoms.
it kind of makes me feel the same about them, like.
Yeah. Well, and realize that the yellow jackets actually are good predators in your garden as well.
Uh-huh. So they
Yeah,
have their.
So they definitely have a place.
Yeah. What are they killing off that I don't want?
All kinds of insects in the garden. I mean, they're predators. They're insect predators. So all kinds, not just anything in particular, but just insects in general. That's how they're getting their protein.
Okay.
So we like them. The thing is, they go crazy for protein in the end of summer.
Yeah.
So when you're out there eating your hamburger, they're coming right at you. Now, I would say,
That explains.
some people may disagree. I think that's a good time to put out the traps. Because what are those wasps? What's going to become of them by the end of summer? They're all going to die.
They die off.
They're going to die anyway. So I think it's okay to set out the trap and protect your patio.